The December 10th Spotlight Cache features Peni Parker, Gladiator, and Sasquatch. Are any of these cards worth your resources? I'll break down each card's potential, share Peni Parker theory crafted decks, and let you know if she's worth unlocking. Let's dive into this week's lineup and see who stands out. Overall, I think we have a pretty good Spotlight Cache week. There is Peni Parker, who is such an interesting card to me. She may be powerful, she might not be, she might only fit in certain decks, or she might have a wide variety of decks. It is hard to know without getting my hands on her, but there's some interesting aspects with her. You have Gladiator, which is a touch random for my taste, because it depends on what decks you're up against, and maybe you have to pair him with a Shang-Chi just in case he pulls a bigger card, which honestly isn't a problem for my decks. But there is this randomness aspect that you potentially put a card on the board for an opponent that they normally wouldn't have played. You thin their deck. There's some drawbacks there, but he has his uses. And then there is Sasquatch, which has fallen out of the meta. You really don't see this card that much anymore, but it is a decent card, 10 power, that gets reduced down based on the decks that it's in. So there's some utility there with this card as well. And so I think overall we have a decent week. So first up, we have Peni Parker, who is an on-reveal card and adds a spider card to your hand, and also has the ability that when it merges, you get +1 energy next turn. And the spider card that gets generated, of course, has direct synergy with Peni Parker, but also you could just play it on any other card, and then you get the ability to move that card. Ultimately, I think Peni Parker will be a decent to good to strong card. I do not think she will be bad. She will have her uses, and it's just going to be a deck building puzzle on how to make her the most effective. And if I decide to unlock her, that's something I will be looking forward to. Starting with our Series 2 deck, ultimately, when Peni Parker merges with the Spider card, who you will always have in hand as long as you play Peni Parker. On turn 2, that means on turn 3 you play Spider. That means on turn 4 you have 5 energy. So we have 3 5-cost cards here that are all pretty good in their own right. Professor X can lock down a lane. You can get into that lane later with a Nightcrawler or a Peni Parker that is merged with Spider to move that into the Professor X lane. Blue Marvel on the last turn can get power there. Ultimately, you could decide for Claw. All of these decks are just theory craft. You have to ultimately see what works best and make proper decisions based on how the deck plays. We have decent power cards, low cost, good power in Medusa and Lizard. Angela scales up. Sunspot, we can soak energy or use the extra energy from Peni Parker if we were unable to. Vision, of course, can slide around. Of course, we have Shang-Chi, because this deck doesn't have a lot of power, so let's remove power from our opponent's side of the board. For the pure Series 3 version, I decided to go with a move deck. So we have the cards that activate move in Iron Fist and Cloak. Peni Parker as well, with her merged card, with the Spider card, is another move activator in a sense. You have these big power, low cost cards, ultimately big power in Dagger, Vulture, and Human Torch. Miles Morales goes down to 1 cost after you move. Doctor Strange moves a card, Cloak as well, if I forgot to mention him. Shang-Chi to juke the opponent on the last turn instead of going with Heimdall. We have Vision and Craven, who benefits from the cards that move into his lane. Ultimately, this is something she can fit into, as she can fit into a bunch of different types of decks, and I will be interested to see what people do within Move with her. And now the worst deck of the bunch is the Peni Parker High Concept. I want to be very clear. These are just ideas, I do not think this deck is good.
I hate you and your channel.
But the reason I'm presenting it anyway is because there are ideas here that I ultimately think will prove out with different additions and subtractions. There is the Wiccan line. There is the War Machine, which gives you, Wiccan gives you 8 energy on turn 6 and 7 energy on turn 5. So on a last turn with 8 energy, you can Valkyrie and Juggernaut. Wasp is here to play into a Valkyrie lane so you can get enough power there. You have Hawkeye, Kate Bishop, and Peni Parker to enable you to trigger your Wiccan. Zabu, we have 3 4-cost cards. Quicksilver enables, again, Wiccan to be triggered. Nico, just her spells are fantastic. Of course, I have Shang-Chi. You have to have Infinite in a War Machine deck. You don't have to, but why aren't you not? So there are a lot of competing ideas here. I'm not convinced this specific exact 12-card deck is what the final version of something like this would look like. But ultimately, this is the type of deck I take into Conquest and see what doesn't feel good and what does. Maybe you don't need Quicksilver in this deck because you have enough cheap cards. Hawkeye, Kate Bishop, Peni Parker generate cards. So you will have enough cards as long as you're drawing enough small cards early. This would be my starting point, but also feel free to take parts of this deck and construct your own. That's really what me presenting this version of this deck is designed for, just to give you all ideas on directions you can go and then make it your own. Gladiator is a decent card, like I said in the opener. I personally don't have him, mainly because I shy away from the more random cards. And this is definitely a pretty random card. In some matchups, he is just completely useless. You don't want to pull an opponent's Infinite or Goliath or Red Hulk. So if they have a big power card deck, you really shy away from wanting to use him. He's fantastic in a full lane. He's fantastic behind Cosmo. It's just a 3/8. That's very good stats on that cost. We are all familiar with his role in mill decks. So if you're a fan of mill, he's fantastic there. Some people play him in Surfer. Decent power, again, as long as you're not pulling a card from the opponent that they want pulled. Even something with low power but a very fantastic effect can also be harmful for you. He is Series 4 as well, so if you have the tokens and you really want him, that's an okay use. But otherwise, I think he's just a decent card in certain archetypes. And then last, we have Sasquatch, which is a interesting card. It is high power, but also it costs less when you play cards the preceding turn, depending on how many you play. Sasquatch is fantastic when paired with cards like Mysterio or in zoo-ish type decks where you can play a bunch of cards on the preceding turn, and then that leads into just a high-powered Sasquatch. At a minimum, it really should only be 5 cost because you in all likelihood are playing on turn 4 at least 1 card, which means on turn 5, Sasquatch costs 5. So I think overall you shouldn't be too disappointed if you end up getting Sasquatch. So will I be unlocking Peni Parker? Yes, I will. It is a very interesting card to me, and that is what I prioritize over power. I like the deck building puzzle, even though it can be frustrating at times. And I am going through that with one of the decks that I am experimenting with right now, unrelated to this video at all. It can be frustrating, but also it is so validating when you come out the other side of that and you have something that is completely unexpected, completely off meta, and it's super competitive. So I will be looking forward to figuring that out with Peni Parker, and hopefully she ends up proving to be a very strong card to boot. So to recap, Peni Parker, I don't know how good she's going to be, but she is interesting to me. So as you heard, I will definitely be unlocking her. Then we have Sasquatch, who is a strong card that I think is just being slept on. So you should be able to have some fun playing Sasquatch in certain decks and be satisfied with that. And then we have Gladiator, who, no cutoff this time. Gladiator is decent as well. And so if you are like me, especially, and you don't have multiple cards this week, I think it is a good spotlight week to use your keys in. We will see if I'm lucky enough to unlock Peni Parker in my first roll. If I do continue for Gladiator, I probably won't. But in the process, if I end up unlocking Gladiator before Peni Parker, I will be satisfied. I have a deck that I really want to put Gladiator in specifically that I haven't featured because I really think it needs Gladiator to work, believe it or not. I'm hopeful I can do that and then feature that deck in addition. Overall, I think this is a very good spotlight week, especially depending on the cards you may or may not have. Thanks for making it this deep into the video, and thank you to all the members, and thank you to you specifically.